Lena, a lover of all things vintage, dreamt of owning a Victorian house. Ever since she was a little girl, she had been fascinated by the elegance and charm of the Victorian era. The intricate designs, the grand architecture, and the rich history captivated her imagination. She would spend hours reading about Victorian homes, imagining herself living in one, surrounded by antiques and vintage decor. Old, grand, full of history, she yearned for it. The idea of walking through hallways that had seen decades of life, of sitting by a fireplace that had warmed generations, filled her with a sense of nostalgia and longing. She could almost hear the whispers of the past, the echoes of laughter and conversations that had once filled those rooms. She scoured newspapers, websites, anything to find her dream home. Every evening after work, she would sit in her cozy apartment, surrounded by vintage trinkets, and search tirelessly. She joined online forums, subscribed to real estate newsletters, and even visited local antique shops, hoping to stumble upon a lead. One day it appeared, a majestic Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town for sale. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. A grand house with a wraparound porch, a turret, and a garden that seemed to have stepped out of a fairy tale. The listing described it as a hidden gem, a piece of history waiting to be restored to its former glory. It was perfect. Lena contacted the agent immediately. Her heart raced as she dialed the number, her mind filled with visions of her future life in that beautiful house. She could already see herself hosting tea parties, decorating the rooms with vintage finds, and spending quiet evenings reading by the fireplace. He seemed hesitant, almost afraid. His voice wavered as he spoke, and Lena could sense an underlying tension. He mentioned that the house had been on the market for a long time, and that previous potential buyers had backed out at the last minute. He mumbled about the house needing a particular kind of owner, someone who understood its history, who could appreciate its unique character. He hinted at some mysterious aspect of the house, something that required a special touch. Lena, blinded by excitement, dismissed it as sales talk. She was too caught up in her dream to heed his warnings. She assured him that she was the perfect person for the house, that she had always dreamed of owning a Victorian home and was ready to take on any challenges it might present. This was her dream, and nothing would stop her. She bought the house. The moment she held the keys in her hand, she felt a surge of joy and determination. She was ready to embrace her new life, to uncover the secrets of her Victorian dream home. The agent's last words, "Be careful," echoed strangely in her ears as she drove away, the keys to her dream home clutched in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the house than met the eye, but she was determined to find out for herself. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one filled with mystery, history, and the promise of adventure. The house stood tall, proud, yet with an air of melancholy. Vines like grasping claws clung to its brick walls. The paint peeled, whispering tales of years gone by. As Lena stepped inside, a chill ran down her spine. The air felt heavy, laden with unspoken stories. Dust motes danced in the faint sunlight that filtered through grimy windows. Furniture, draped in white sheets, loomed like ghosts. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards beneath her feet. Despite the eerie stillness, Lena felt a strange sense of peace. This was hers now, a piece of history frozen in time. The first night was the hardest. Every creak, every groan of the old house sent shivers down Lena's spine. She lay awake, listening to the wind whistling through the gaps in the window panes. Then, she heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from behind the wall. Lena dismissed it as a rat. Old houses attracted pests, but the scratching continued, night after night. It grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes it sounded like fingernails on wood, sending chills down her spine. Lena tried to rationalize it, but fear began to creep into her heart. This was more than just an unwelcome rodent. As days turned into weeks, the scratching became the least of Lena's worries. Whispers started. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, then clearer, weaving their way into her dreams. They spoke her name, beckoned her, their voices a chorus of chilling whispers. One day, Lena saw a fleeting shadow in the corner of her eye. A tall, gaunt figure, gone as quickly as it appeared. The house felt alive now, watching her, its presence growing stronger with each passing day. Fear turned to an unsettling curiosity. What did the house want? And forgotten tools. Section 6. The Secret Chamber. Behind the shelves, a hidden door. The whispers reached a fever pitch, urging Lena forward. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open. It creaked open, revealing a small, dusty chamber. The air was thick with the smell of decay, sending a shiver down her spine. The oil lamp flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. And then she saw them. Coffins, several of them, lined up against the wall, draped in cobwebs. A cold dread filled her. The whispers abruptly stopped. In the sudden silence, Lena could hear her own ragged breathing. Section 7. Trapped! Lena stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. A scream caught in her throat. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, making it hard to breathe. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering light of a single candle. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones, a chill that seemed to come from the very walls of the mansion. As she turned to flee, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sound was so loud it felt like it shook the very foundation of the house. Lena's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was it the wind, or something more sinister? The sound echoed through the chamber, bouncing off the walls like thunder. Each reverberation seemed to grow louder, amplifying her fear. The silence that followed was even more terrifying, a heavy, oppressive quiet that pressed down on her. Lena whirled around, her blood turning to ice. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to shift and change, playing tricks on her mind. She felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. The heavy wooden door, once slightly ajar, was now firmly shut, as if pulled by an unseen force. Panic surged through her. She tried to remember if she had seen any other exits, but her mind was blank. The walls seemed to close in on her, the room growing smaller with each passing second. She banged on the door, her fists pounding against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. Her hands began to ache, but she didn't stop. Desperation gave her strength, but it was no use. The door remained solid and unyielding. The whispers started again, this time louder, closer, surrounding her, taunting her. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the room with their eerie, disembodied voices. Lena covered her ears, but the whispers only grew louder, penetrating her very thoughts. Lena was trapped, sealed in the darkness with the silent occupants of the coffins. She could feel their presence, a cold, lifeless energy that seemed to seep into her very soul. The room felt like a tomb, and she was its latest prisoner. Her mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. She was alone, surrounded by the dead with no escape in sight. Sputtered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness. Then she felt it. a cold breath on her neck. It was as if the very air around her had come alive, whispering secrets of the dead. She could almost hear the faint rustle of fabric, the soft shuffle of feet on the dusty floor. The darkness was complete, enveloping her in a shroud of fear. The faint scent of decay filling her nostrils. Terror choked her. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing, praying for it all to be a nightmare. But the whispers continued swirling around her. They were soft at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind, but they grew louder, more insistent. She could hear the words now, though they made no sense. They were a jumble of sounds, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, their chilling laughter echoing in the darkness. Lena was theirs now, another captive of the house. She could feel their presence all around her, a cold, clammy sensation that made her skin crawl. The laughter was a cruel mockery, a reminder of her helplessness. She was trapped, a prisoner in a house that seemed to have a life of its own. The walls closed in on her, the darkness pressing down like a physical weight. Her dreams of a vintage haven turned into a living nightmare. The house that had once seemed so charming, so full of history and character, was now a place of terror and despair. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, was a reminder of her captivity. She had come seeking peace and solitude, but had found only fear and darkness. The house had claimed her, and there was no escape. Devoured dreams.